Mountain Bike Express moves to Scotland as the race for the 7-Up BMBF National Point Series nears its end.
Welcome to Craik on the Scottish borders for the 5th round of the 7-Up BMBF National Point Series. So far, no one rider has been dominant in either the men's or the women's races.
After her win in the last round, Sian took the lead in the series ahead of Deb, with the best 3 races plus the final round counting to the overall result. In the men's series, David has held the lead since the 2nd round, but with all the top 4 riders having won one race, it's a tight round. Before the main races, let's catch up with the juniors. The Craik Forest course is a fast 6.5 mile loop, despite a slow boggy section and a technical wooded stretch around No Bog Hill. The main climb up Crib Law is on fire track before some fast single track and an open grassy descent bring the riders down to 8 House Burn by the end of the lap. As the juniors set off, the field was back to full strength with the series leader Matt Guy deciding that he could not afford to take any more chances by riding in the seniors race. At Bethgelert in round 4, he took that gamble for the sake of experience at the longer distances. But Alan Gunner's convincing win closed the gap in the oval positions and ensured that the series wouldn't be decided till the final. As the leaders headed down a steep drop-off at the back of No Bog Hill, Matt had resumed his place at the front. But as usual, Alan was right on his wheel. And for a change, those two seemed to be unable to shake off the attentions of the following trio, Rob Thackeray, Kevin Duckworth and Ollie Beckinsale. 30 seconds down on the leaders, the chase was led by Scottish rider Martin Graham, with most of the junior field, as well as the crowd, obviously relishing the drop-off. Way down from Crib Law at the end of the lap, and despite Matt putting on the pressure, there was still no significant gap at the front as the leaders charged through the single track, though it looked like the elastic was beginning to stretch for Rob, Ollie and Kevin. As they headed down the open descent towards 8 House Burn, Alan went to the front and upped the pace enough to ensure that he and Matt were just out of sight as they went into the woods before lap 2. Alan was also pleased to see that, for a change, Matt seemed to be struggling to stay with him. Behind them, the following trio were getting into their own battle for third, which would relieve the pressure on Matt and Alan. Still on the descent was the chasing group, now headed by James Sutton. At 16, James is one of the younger junior riders. Alan and Matt are 18, and he was third at the last round in Wales. This group had obviously eased off the pace as they were now 3 minutes and 15 seconds behind the leaders, though there was less than a minute between the next 10 riders. The group were working together, and by 8 House Burn, Phil Wilding had gone to the front ahead of Martin, James, Paul Butler and Ian Matthews, but they had no realistic chance of catching the leaders. Picking up the pace on the 3rd and final lap, Alan and Matt were still out front as they headed onto the fire track for the main climb up Crib Law. Matt has had a heavy schedule of road races recently, which may have taken it out of him, as he definitely looked less comfortable than Alan.
Good ride, lads. Good ride.
Sensing this, Alan had kept up the pressure, and though he hadn't dropped Matt, it meant that he'd opened a 1 and 20 second lead over 3rd place Kevin Duckworth, who was now 20 seconds clear after the trio had been split asunder by the pace.
Good ride.
In 4th, Ollie Beckinsale couldn't manage to stay with Kevin, but he had moved 6 seconds clear of Robert, who was suffering with cramp.
Well done, Ollie. Keep going. Push, 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 push. Well done. Well done.
Go on, you can do it. you can.
Go on,
After a strong start to the season, Rob was slipping down the tables, particularly as a double puncture had meant he failed to finish in Wales. Heading down the single track for the final time, and Alan was holding on to a 20-second lead that he had gained on the climb, despite a final charge from Matt that had him looking more like a downhiller as he flew through the gully. Kevin was putting in a strong final lap as he had closed the gap to less than a minute on Matt, whilst comfortably moving over a minute ahead of Ollie, who, like Rob, had begun to tire, and both were wanting to cruise in without incident, having secured their positions earlier in the race. So for the second race on the trot, Alan took the flag first.
We were going round and we were trying to, we were doing bit and a bit, but I seem to be doing more, and I think it's because he's just come back from Crete, riding on the road, but still, a win's a win.
Fabulous win, fabulous win. Because you were together for the first 2 laps.
It was really strange. We were like in a group of 5 of us, and then coming around towards the end of the second, through the woods, we just raced how we would normally, and just got away, and then just started racing each other, sort of thing.
Well, in the end, Alan had a reasonably comfortable win, but the top 5 were all over 3 minutes clear of the rest of the field. So the overall standings are now very close, though barring a major upset, only Matt or Alan will be contesting the title. The World Cup moved into the Rocky Mountains for round 7, and with it came some serious climbing. In the women's race, Julie Furtado launched an early attack, which saw the rest of the field going backwards. And with Alison Sider racing on the road, who would challenge her? By the technical descents, Furtado was clear away, and her handling at second place, Ruthie Mathis, floundering for an answer. In the men's race, the first 2 in the series, Krishnesh and Rich were missing, and some less-known riders came to the fore. Once again, Tinker Juarez was well up there, but it was a young Swiss rider, Beat Varbel, who looked the strongest. Vale also saw Tim Gould returning to form, and had he not crashed on the final lap, he would have done better than 6th, but Varbel's win was the weekend's biggest surprise. Though Krishnesh stayed put at the top, Juarez 5th was enough to see him move into the 2nd spot. Furtado remains comfortably rooted in 1st, while Susan de Mattei's 3rd moved her into the frame. Back to Scotland, and as the elite field prepared to set off, attention was again on Diamondback's Nick Craig and Rally's David Baker, the lead 2 riders in the series. They should be battling at the front, particularly since both Tim Gould and Gary Ford were still away in America. With a number of other riders also failing to make it north of the border, a reduced field meant that there were extra points up for grabs in this 4-lap race. As the field turned onto the first single track, David Baker had gone to the front to ensure that he didn't get tangled up in any problems in the middle of the group. And with Adrian Timmis, Chris Young, Dan Cook and Barry Clark also up there, Rally and Orange was setting out to control the race. While in 9th was Tim Davies, who had just returned from the States and was hoping to continue his improvement in form, having finished 7th in round 6 of the World Cup. The women's race was also depleted, particularly at the top end. Caroline Alexander was still on the World Cup trail, and she had been joined in North America by Deb Murrell, while Sally Timmis was competing in the National Road Race Championships. So as the race got underway, the favourite was the series leader, and winner last time out, Pacey's Sian Roberts. As they turned off the fire track, Sian was surprisingly enough in the lead, since she is usually a slow starter, but at least on the single track she was able to control the speed of the race, with Life Cycle's Sally Hibberd, who was 2nd in Wales, looking for a way through. Also up there, New Zealander Helen Gilroy, Rocky Mountains Angela Ward, Stiff's Michelle Bergstrand and Orange's Janet Wilkinson, who were all looking to score big points here. But as the leaders set off round No Bog Hill, Sian, Sally and Helen had opened a gap on the rest of the field. Picking the men up at the big drop-off and David was still out front, having opened a slight gap on Orange's John Clay, who in his first year mountain biking was still weak on the technical sections. That let David's teammate Barry through into second, ahead of John and his teammate Chris. Behind them, Richard Thackeray and Nick Craig were trying to close down the gap before it became significant. When the women reached the drop, Sally was in the lead, having opened a slight gap on the running section through the bog. And none of the lead three were going to risk a tumble here with the race so close. Sian was taking it particularly easy, as she was still suffering from the injury to her ankle, which she picked up the day before the first race of the series. While behind them, Michelle Bergstrand and Angela Ward both took the opportunity to knock a few seconds off the gap to the leaders by riding.
Well ridden.
We rejoined the men's race heading down from the highest point on the course at Crib Law. David had maintained his lead at the front, but in an effort to close down the gap and defend his position in the series, Nick was now heading the chase. And on a descent where routes were hidden by mulch, he had opened a 6-second gap on Barry and John, who looked to be having his best ride of the season. By the time the race had reached 8 House Burn, Nick had put in another of his bursts that were becoming a trademark. In order to close the gap down completely, and just to push home the point, he took the lead as they crossed the ford. Not wishing to miss out on what had all the makings of a race-winning break, Barry had also put in a massive effort to try and get back on terms. That saw him drop John, who had also slipped back behind Pace's Richard Thackeray, and now joined forces with his teammate Chris in an effort to get back in the race. 50 seconds down on them were Rally's number 3 Adrian Timmis and Rocky Mountain's Paul Dixon, who, though not yet challenging the likes of Nick and David, has been consistently in the top dozen all season. While further back and out of the top 10 was Tim Davies, who had obviously not fully recovered from his trip to the States and wisely opted to retire at the end of the lap, though he was doing better than ace downhiller Simon Kipling.
Yeah, excellent.